There are no TVs in the Roosevelt Room, a venue Kelly deliberately seeks out for its lack of distractions, but this distraction was unavoidable this morning. The internal White House position, summarized by two sources: Ty will take care of it. Ty Cobb, the White House lawyer handling the Mueller investigation, conveyed the message to staff this morning that there'd be no response to the Manafort news. One of those sources told me people are relieved it's Manafort and not Flynn who was indicted. Manafort is further removed because he wasn't here when Trump was elected. Because it's Manafort, it's purely a campaign matter. Nobody internal will be weighing in. That's the holding position. Other sources close to this situation admitted they're less relaxed about where these indictments could lead. I've had dozens of conversations about this subject with administration officials over the past months, and while nobody I've spoken to genuinely thinks collusion with Russia happened on the campaign, plenty worry about what Bob Mueller's crack team of financial investigators will turn up on Trump and his allies. Manafort left the campaign in August, but his business partner, Gates, never fully left Trump world. Gates raised money for the campaign and worked with the RNC. He worked with Trump's close friend Tom Barrack on the inauguration preparations. A former administration official spotted Gates at the White House several times early in the Trump administration, and he was, until March, working for a pro-Trump outside group, America First Policies. In other words, just as Manafort can't be dismissed as a marginal figure in the campaign, something Sean Spicer absurdly tried to argue when he was press secretary, nor can the White House spin that Gates was a nobody. If there's any blowback, it's going to be because Gates was not completely cut off, a former Trump campaign official told me. A source who ran into Gates last week before the CNN story broke about the imminent indictments said his usually jovial associate looked pretty dispirited. The events in question took place just days after Papadopoulos joined the campaign. So was Papadopoulos, known for embellishing details of his resume in the past, making legitimate overtures, or just a young staffer trying to impress his bosses with foreign policy connections? What did he have to offer Mueller in order to strike the deal? The highlights of Papadopoulos' biography, according to his LinkedIn profile and a report from the Washington Post last year on the Trump campaign's foreign policy advisors. He graduated from DePaul University in Chicago in 2009 and received a master's degree from University College London in 2010, subsequently branding himself as an oil, gas, and policy consultant with expertise in the Eastern Mediterranean. He interned for the Hudson Institute, a conservative think tank in Washington, but inflated his position there on his LinkedIn profile prior to the WAPO report. He also claimed to have delivered a keynote address at a 2008 American Hellenic Institute Foundation conference and taken part in a 2012 Model United Nations conference in Geneva, but both assertions were refuted by others who had taken part. He worked for Ben Carson's presidential campaign as a foreign policy advisor from November 2015 until February 2016, jumping to the Trump campaign in March 2016. After joining the Trump campaign in March 2016, Papadopoulos learned that he would be an advisor on the Trump campaign. He met with a professor believed to be Joseph Mifsud, the director of the London Academy of Diplomacy, who promised dirt from Russians on Hillary Clinton. He met with a Russian woman along with the professor. Also in March, Papadopoulos suggested that the Trump campaign meet with Russian leadership to discuss U.S.-Russia ties under President Trump in an email. He officially switched to the Trump campaign in May of 2016. Also in May, Papadopoulos sent an email with subject line "Request from Russia to meet Mr. Trump" to a Trump campaign official. He was first interviewed by the FBI in January of this year, and told officials that he had begun talking to the Russian woman and professor before he joined the campaign, which was later proven false. In February, he deleted his Facebook account and then started using a new cell number. Government lawyers sought bail bond of $10 million for Manafort and $5 million for Gates, with an official from pretrial services specifically requesting high-intensity supervision for Manafort as he is considered a flight risk. Both defense lawyers said their clients had turned over their passports. Both agreed to the bail recommendations, including home confinement, and will have to report to pretrial services every day by phone. After the hearing, Kevin Downing, Manafort's attorney, said there is no evidence that Mr. Manafort and the Trump campaign colluded with the Russian government. Downing also claimed Manafort's consulting work in Ukraine had been intended to promote democracy and bring Ukraine closer to the US and EU. Dubious claims, as Manafort's chief client was Viktor Yanukovych, the leader of a pro-Russia party. White House President Trump's economic advisors have said the 20% corporate rate is their only non-negotiable on taxes, and Sarah Huckabee Sanders said during a press briefing that the White House position remains unchanged. Circular logic. The concept of a phase-in seems designed to mitigate budget deficit growth in the years immediately following the tax plan getting passed, given what appears to be a relative paucity of payers. But advocates, including the White House, have argued that deep tax cuts will serve as their own payers by spurring greater economic growth. Delaying those cuts, therefore, also should delay economic growth. The last known conversation between Manafort and Trump was in February, Sanders said. On George Papadopoulos' March invitation to Trump to meet with Putin, I'm not sure that the president recalls specific details of the meeting. On Trump's hiring of Manafort and Gates, there were seasoned operatives. Trump hired Paul Manafort to oversee the delegate process, not much else. She said she has not asked the president whether he regrets the hiring. On Papadopoulos' role, he served on a volunteer advisory committee. There's no intention to fire special counsel Robert Mueller, she added. We still expect the investigation to conclude soon. On Trump's reaction, he received the news without a lot of reaction, because it doesn't have anything to do with us. On presidential pardons in the Russia probe, Sanders said she hasn't spoken to the president about it. One note on tax reform: Trump wants corporate rate to start at 20%, not decrease over time. But the House bill, which will be introduced Wednesday, may include a 5-year phase-in for the rate to reach 20% by 2022, per Bloomberg. Catalonia, home to Barcelona, is one of Spain's wealthiest and most popular regions in Europe. It also enjoys a high degree of autonomy. However, many Catalans feel Madrid takes more money from them than they get in return. This conflict was exacerbated during the 2008 recession, when Spain's economic failure hit Catalonia hard, creating large spikes in unemployment rates and driving some residents into poverty. There are also historical grievances between Catalonia and Spain, many of which stem from Catalonia's poor treatment under the dictatorship of Francisco Franco. Those deep-rooted cultural issues are still very prominent in Spain today. Catalonia held an independence referendum on October 1, despite the Spanish government declaring it illegal. There was only one question on the ballot: do you want Catalonia to become an independent state in the form of a republic? Catalan officials later declared that 90% of those who turned out voted for independence. However, more than 750,000 votes could not be counted because polling stations were closed and ballot boxes were confiscated as a result of the clashes between voters and police officers, according to a Catalan spokesman. Following the vote, Catalan President Carles Puigdemont signed a declaration of independence, but delayed implementation to allow talks with the Spanish government. Madrid set a deadline for Puigdemont to clarify his intentions, but it passed with no progress, so Spanish Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy announced plans to impose direct rule on the region to keep them from declaring independence. Catalonia's regional parliament passed a motion Friday to establish its independence from Spain, just hours after Rajoy made his case for measures to keep Spain unified. The vote was approved with 70 in favor of independence, 10 against, and 2 blank ballots in the 135-member parliament, per NPR. Catalan lawmakers opposed to seceding walked out of the chamber in protest prior to the vote. Moments after, the Spanish Senate authorized the government in a 214-47 vote to invoke Article 155 of Spain's constitution, giving Rajoy the power to take direct control over Catalonia's government. The measure is expected to go into effect after it's published in the government register Friday night. Rajoy said he had no alternative to implement the unprecedented measures, stating that Puigdemont and his separatist cabinet were acting illegally. With Article 155 now in effect, the Spanish government is able to run Catalan government ministries, as well as local police and local media stations from Madrid, per the Financial Times. In the immediate aftermath, Catalonia can't do much more aside from removing Spanish flags and symbols from government buildings. As the AP notes, Catalonia does not have security forces sufficient to set up borders, and key areas such as taxes, foreign affairs, defense, ports, airports and trains are in the hands of the Spanish government in Madrid. Spain also recently took virtually full control of Catalonia's spending. So far, no country or international body has expressed support for the Catalan government's push for independence, with the European Union standing firmly behind Madrid and Rajoy. Jean-Claude Juncker, president of the European Commission, has said Catalonia will not be able to be an EU member state if they secede, and Martin Schulz, president of the EU Parliament, said no one in the EU will recognize Catalan independence, per AP. U.S. State Department spokeswoman Heather Nauert said in a statement Friday Catalonia is an integral part of Spain, and the United States supports the Spanish government's constitutional measures to keep Spain strong and united. Rajoy assumed direct control of Catalonia on Friday, sacked its separatist government, and called a snap election for December 21. Puigdemont Vice President Oriol Junqueras said they wouldn't accept their dismissal, and their respective parties, PDECAT and Esquerra Republicana de Catalunya, said Monday they would take part in the December election. Spanish prosecutors in Madrid have brought rebellion, sedition, and embezzlement charges against Catalonian leader Carles Puigdemont and other members of parliament involved in the independence vote. Toni Podesta is stepping down as the head of his powerhouse lobbying firm, the Podesta Group, per Politico. The firm got pulled into special counsel Robert Mueller's Russia investigation over public relations work it completed on behalf of Paul Manafort to promote Ukrainian interests in the United States. Podesta's brother John was Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman. Why it matters: Podesta is a huge power player in D.C. lobbying, so his departure will shake up K Street in a big way. It also shows just how far-reaching the consequences of the Mueller probe might be for some big names in Washington who don't have any connection to the Trump administration. Surprise, surprise. Earlier reports had suggested that the merger was gaining momentum, so this is a shock to the MA system. Particularly the notion of the bullet being fired by Sprint owner SoftBank, as there was a sense that CEO Masayoshi Son had been publicly supportive of President Trump in order to better the deal's chances of regulatory approval. Caveat: don't underestimate Son or the possibility that SoftBank walking away is a negotiating tactic. Axios has reached out to a SoftBank spokesperson, and will update this post if we receive comment. Go deeper: how a Sprint T-Mobile merger could jolt wireless. Caller Connolly also stated in her ruling HT Michael Scarcella, senior editor at law.com, that the way in which Trump announced the change in military policy, via Twitter, played a role in her decision. The discriminations in this case was certainly of an unusual character. After a lengthy review process by senior military personnel, the military had recently determined that permitting transgender individuals to serve would not have adverse effects on the military. Then, the president abruptly announced, via Twitter, without the formality or deliberative processes that generally accompany the development and announcement of major policy change that will gravely affect the lives of many Americans. These circumstances provide additional support for the plaintiff's claim that the decision to exclude transgender individuals was not driven by genuine concern regarding military efficacy.